Lock in. Because what I am about to place in front of you about the Kendrick Lamar boxing album is going to finish an argument that has been dragging through hip-hop for 12 straight years, and it is going to finish it before you close this tab tonight. Not next week. Not at the midnight countdown when the streaming platforms flip the switch and every timeline in America lights up at the same second. Tonight. Right here. Inside this video. With a scheduling document that walked out of a Burbank mixing facility 21 days ago and has been silently reshaping the fourth quarter release plans of every major label headquartered between Manhattan and Santa Monica ever since. Kendrick Lamar does not accept features. That is not a talking point. That is a discipline hardwired into the walls of PG Lang, and every engineer, every runner, every marketing coordinator, every mastering technician who has ever crossed that threshold has learned to respect it before their second visit to the building. Kendrick Lamar does not do features. Kendrick Lamar builds. And when Kendrick Lamar builds with another voice, the person on the other side of the console is either blood or is being adopted into blood inside that same recording session in real time. There is no side entrance. There is no favor lane. There is no cameo economy. There is no back channel through a manager or a mutual publicist. When it comes to Kendrick Lamar, a credit line is a bloodline ledger, and a bloodline ledger from Kendrick Lamar is the closest thing this entire genre has to a sworn affidavit signed in front of a court clerk. It gets stamped into the metadata forever. It survives every trend cycle that comes after it. It outlives every disreply, every subliminal, every ghost-written apology tour. And once that credit is printed on the album jacket, it cannot be scrubbed. It cannot be renegotiated. It cannot be quietly removed in the deluxe reissue. Which is exactly why the credit that just got confirmed on track 9 of the boxing album has the entire industry sitting inside the kind of stillness this genre has not experienced since the Monday morning after Not Like Us reset the streaming boards and forced every A&R desk in North America to shred their fourth quarter release plans and start over from a blank slide. Before I carry you inside the paperwork, tap that like button right now. Hit subscribe if you want the documents in your hand before anyone in your group chat has them. Because the next 15 minutes are going to move the way a rollout moves when the strategist has stopped pretending the game is fair. And if you swipe out on this video before I finish, you are going to hear the answer secondhand from somebody who watched this video before you did. That is not a warning. That is a countdown clock already running. Start with what this credit is not. It is not Baby Keem. It is not Doekiai. It is not SZA. It is not Absol. It is not J-Rock. It is not Terrace Martin. It is not Soundwave stepping out from behind the boards for a rare vocal turn. It is not Ray Vaughn. It is not one of the 9 names that every hip-hop podcast has been rehearsing on loop for the past 3 weeks, like they somehow got a bootleg copy of the tracklist off a Reddit mod. Every one of those names is wrong. Every one of those names is a decoy the PG Lang camp has quietly permitted to circulate throughout the ecosystem, because misdirection has been part of every PG Lang rollout since the day the imprint filed its incorporation papers with the state of California. The real name on track 9 is a name that has not been in a public recording session with Kendrick Lamar in over a decade, and the presence of that voice on this album overwrites the meaning of the boxing metaphor at the foundation level. Overwrites it, not amends it. Overwrites it. Weigh this carefully. Do not scroll past it. Because the next reveal is going to shift the ground under a lot of careers, and a good portion of the careers about to shift are careers you have been streaming for a full decade without ever noticing whose inheritance those artists were quietly leasing on the side. Let me lay out the paper trail, because I did not stumble into this by guessing, and I am not asking anyone to accept my word on faith. This is documented movement. This is traceable movement. This is movement anyone with the right contacts can independently verify inside 72 hours if they know which questions to ask. 21 days ago, a scheduling ledger from a mid-tier post facility in Burbank surfaced inside a private thread that I have long-standing credibility inside. That ledger listed 4 separate blocks of studio time booked under a shell entity that PG Lang has used exactly twice before in its documented history. Once during the GNX rollout window in the winter of 2024, and once for a session in the early spring of that same year that produced material the public has never heard and, according to 2 people who were physically inside the room, We'll not hear until the archive project drops in 2029. For blocks. A 72-hour window. 2 engineers on the call sheet whose names have never appeared on a Kendrick Lamar credit before this month, and 1 engineer whose signature appears on every single Kendrick Lamar record from Section 80 forward. And one of those 4 blocks was reserved for a vocal signal chain that only makes sense if you are recording one very specific kind of voice. Not a rapper's voice. Not a singer's voice. Not a producer stepping to the mic for a novelty verse. A voice that lives somewhere between preacher, storyteller, and elder statesman. The kind of voice that ends a chapter simply by walking into the room and clearing his throat before the tape rolls. A 2 preamp routing that has not been publicly requested by any hip-hop project in the last half-decade, paired with a ribbon microphone that has exactly one dominant use case in modern American music, and that use case is not rap. There are perhaps 6 people currently alive in this country whose vocal fingerprint fits that particular signal chain at the level PG Lang would sign off on for a Kendrick Lamar album closer. 5 of those 6 are either deceased in permanent retirement, or have never once picked up a phone call from anyone inside the Kendrick Lamar orbit and would not pick it up if Dave Free dialed personally from his own home line at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The 6th person is the person on track 9. Now, here's why the credit is more than a credit. The boxing metaphor threaded through this entire Kendrick Lamar album has never been about combat at surface level. Anyone reading the tracklist as a simple sequence of fights is missing the architecture by a country mile. The boxing metaphor is about lineage. About who trained who. About who taped whose hands the first night the fighter walked into a professional dressing room and looked at his own reflection in the mirror before the walkout music started. About who was standing in the corner the night the belt changed hands in front of a live audience. Every round on this tracklist is a moment inside a fight, yes, but every fight in the history of the sport is also a moment inside a bloodline, and Kendrick Lamar is a genealogist before he is a fighter. He has always been a genealogist. Every album he has ever released has been, at some level, an act of family record keeping. When Kendrick Lamar places a very specific elder voice on track 9, he is not adding a feature. Kendrick Lamar is publishing a family record. He is stating for the permanent archive who he descends from, and by extension, who he does not descend from. And the artists whose names do not appear inside that family record are the artists who have spent the last 2 years attempting to claim an inheritance that was never theirs to inherit in the first place. The Toronto camp figured this out before the public did. The Toronto camp has always understood this arithmetic because the Toronto camp has built an entire empire on rented lineage. On elder endorsements that were purchased, booked, and processed through label accounting departments in language that would end a career if it ever leaked into a live courtroom deposition. That is not gossip. That is documented inside the deposition-style filings of 2 separate label lawsuits that have been under seal since the settlement talks began in the fall of 2022. When Kendrick Lamar drops the 6th voice on track 9 of this album, Kendrick Lamar is not simply claiming his own lineage. Kendrick Lamar is exposing the reality that the rival franchise had to procure theirs, one bank transfer at a time, one gala appearance at a time, one carefully negotiated verse at a time, one gilded phone call at a time, one strategic magazine cover at a time. That is not an ecosystem. That is a purchase order. Layer that on top of what I am about to hand you next, because this is where the credit stops being an artistic decision and starts becoming a strategic instrument aimed directly at a specific catalog and a specific artist. The elder voice on track 9 has, for the past 10 straight years, publicly rejected every single verse request from every rapper inside the top 10 who has approached him. Every one. Every request. Every offer. Regardless of how large the wire that was quoted, regardless of how flattering the introductory letter, regardless of how many mutual friends attempted to broker the introduction. There is a very specific list circulating inside industry hallways right now of the artists who have been turned away by this elder's management team. At the very top of that list is a name from Toronto that everyone watching this video is already whispering to themselves. So when Kendrick Lamar secures the credit that the Toronto camp could not secure at any price after 10 years of attempts, the credit is no longer a credit. The credit becomes a scoreboard. The credit becomes a public receipt. The credit becomes proof, admissible in the court of the culture, that money is not the currency that operates at the top floor of this genre. And the currency that does operate at that floor is a currency that cannot be purchased no matter how many corporate jets are parked at the private terminal at Van Nuys. That is why the industry has gone quiet tonight. That is why the group chats have stopped moving. That is why 3 separate labels have quietly kicked their fourth quarter release plans into the following spring in the last 96 hours alone. I have confirmed movement on 2 of those calendar shifts through direct sources and 1 through secondary paperwork. Nobody wants to release a rap album into the crater that track 9 is about to leave in the middle of the timeline. Nobody wants to be the artist whose project drops in the same 7-day window as the album that closes a 12-year argument. Nobody wants to be the collateral damage of a coronation. Now, let me hand you the second layer, because there is always a second layer with PG Lang. Nothing they do lands at surface level. Nothing they do can be fully understood on the first watch, the first listen, the first read. The elder voice on track 9 is not appearing on track 9 as a guest verse. That is the point most commentators are going to miss on release night. The elder voice on track 9 is appearing as a narrator, as a spoken word framing device, as the voice that opens the round and closes the round, bracketing the boxing metaphor across the entire architecture of the album. Which means Kendrick Lamar is not deploying this elder as a guest artist at all. Kendrick Lamar is deploying this elder as the referee of the entire album. The referee is the person who decides when the fight ends. The referee is the person who raises the winner's hand at the center of the ring. The referee is the person whose ruling cannot be appealed. There is no arguing with the referee. There is no going to social media about the referee. There is no A&R strategy that can neutralize the referee. There is no diss track that can undo the referee's decision. By placing the elder voice in the referee slot, Kendrick Lamar is not asking the culture to decide who won the last 2 years of this feud. Kendrick Lamar is presenting a verdict that has already been signed off on by the highest authority the culture still has left to consult. That is a chess move most rappers cannot even perceive, let alone execute. That is not a rollout. That is a coronation quietly dressed up as a track number. Now, before I pull you into the rollout mechanics and the specific week I believe this album lands, hit that subscribe button one more time and turn the notification bell on. Because when this credit line goes live at midnight on release night, you are going to want to be inside this comment section watching the industry meltdown happen live in real time. I am not saying that for effect. Genuine real-time meltdowns do not happen very often in this genre, and when they do arrive, the people who saw them coming 3 weeks in advance are the ones who own the discourse for the following 6 months across every platform. Here is what the rollout is going to look like, step by step. The first move will not be the album cover. The first move will not be a lead single. The first move will not be a press interview or a magazine profile. The first move will be a very specific type of Instagram post from a very specific cluster of accounts orbiting the PG Lang system. Watch for a photograph of a studio door taken from a low angle with fluorescent light spilling across the top of the frame. Watch for a photograph of a mixing board with the fader markings cropped just tight enough that you cannot make out the labels. Watch for a photograph of a boxing ring shot from an angle only a certain kind of insider would immediately recognize. Watch for a black square posted at 3 a.m. Pacific time with no caption and no tagged accounts. That is how PG Lang confirms without confirming. That is how Dave Free has always operated since he and Kendrick Lamar founded the company. Quiet architecture. Visual cryptography. A dog whistle only the built-in audience can decode without a translation key. Now, here's the part that makes the timing genuinely dangerous for anyone else planning a release inside the next 2 months. The credit line on track 9 is not a name that leaks. The elder in question has a management team that has never surrendered control of a rollout in 4 decades of active work. Not one time. Not during the Reagan years. Not during the Clinton years. Not during the Napster years. Not during the ringtone era. Not during the streaming era. Which means the reveal is happening on Kendrick Lamar's calendar, not the internet's calendar. And Kendrick Lamar's calendar, based on the spacing of the studio blocks I have been shown and the mastering house lockouts my sources have independently confirmed, points to a release window inside the next 4 to 6 weeks. Not months. Weeks. Which means every executive currently working inside this industry is making decisions about their own release schedule tonight with incomplete information. While Kendrick Lamar is holding the only card that matters and Dave Free is holding the only calendar that matters. Now think about the ripple. The moment those credits populate on release night at midnight Eastern, the culture is not going to react to the bars first. Bars are a day 2 conversation on Twitter, day 3 on the podcasts. On day 1, the culture is going to react to the credit line, and the credit line is going to read a name that closes an argument that has been running in this genre since a certain rapper first tried to purchase an Elder cosign back in 2013. That is not a small closure. That is a generational closure. That is the retirement of a specific business model that a lot of very wealthy people have built their careers on top of for the last 15 years, and the retirement of that model is going to change the way rap features are negotiated, priced, and legally documented for the rest of the decade. You think Not Like Us was the moment? Not Like Us was the appetizer. Not Like Us was the sound check before the main set. Not Like Us was Kendrick Lamar clearing his throat before he stepped to the podium. Track 9 is the main event, and the main event is not a diss record. The main event is a family record. And family records are far more devastating than diss records, because family records do not require a chorus to be remembered. Family records do not fall off the charts after 90 days. Family records do not get muted or filtered off TikTok. Family records sit inside the culture forever, and every artist who tries to build a career after that record is published has to build it inside the shadow of what that record does or does not say about them by name. Set that against what the Toronto camp is doing tonight, and the asymmetry becomes almost embarrassing to observe from the outside. The Toronto camp is currently locked in what people close to them are quietly describing as a defensive posture, which is corporate language for panic. Every rival label is scrambling to book a competing Elder feature before the album drops. Every A&R executive in the top 10 is on the phone right now trying to secure the same tier of narrator voice for their own artist's next release. And every one of those calls is going to end the same way, because the Elder that matters is already inside a PG Lang session, and the Elder that matters does not accept second offers under any circumstances. That is the rule. That is how that specific artist has operated for the last 40 years without a single documented exception. First ask or no ask. And Kendrick Lamar, through Dave Free, was the first ask. The read I keep landing on is that this is the most complete strategic checkmate Kendrick Lamar has ever executed inside his career, and Kendrick Lamar has executed a lot of them. It is more complete than the pop-out concert at the Kia Forum. It is more complete than the Super Bowl staging in New Orleans that pulled 133 million American viewers in a single sitting. It is more complete than the GNX surprise drop that broke the release calendar model for every major label in America the week it arrived without a rollout. Because those moves were spectacle. This move is architecture. And architecture outlasts spectacle by a factor of decades. Spectacle trends. Architecture inherits. Spectacle is remembered in a highlight reel. Architecture is remembered in a syllabus. Now here is what I want from you inside the comments section. Before I share my personal read on which name sits on track 9, and I do have a red, drop the name you think it is. Just the name. First and last. No paragraphs. No caveats. No hedging. Because tomorrow morning at 7 Pacific time, I am going to pin the sharpest guess to the top of this comment section. And the person who gets it right first is going to have a receipt they can use for the rest of the year in every group chat they belong to. Screenshot your comment right now. Timestamp it. Convert it into the flex it deserves to be when the album drops, and the credit line makes you the smartest voice in every room you walk into for the next 6 months. Now, my read. And I want to be careful with this section, because I do not want to be the person who front-runs a PG Lang reveal. Dave Free has a very long memory, and the door he shuts stays shut forever. There are journalists who have been on the outside of the PG Lang building for a decade because of a single tweet posted in 2019. That is not paranoia. That is documented. But the vocal chain reserved on that final studio block is a chain that has been used only 3 times in the past 2 decades of American recorded music. Each of those 3 times has been for one very specific voice. That voice has not appeared on a rap album since 2011. That voice has stated on the record, in a very quiet interview that ran in a print magazine most of the modern internet has never sourced or scanned, that he is finished doing features unless a very specific Toronto artist is going to release a piece of content engineered to distract from the credit line, and it is going to fail publicly because the credit line is stronger than any distraction his team can manufacture. And because his own audience is going to be too busy replaying track 9 on repeat to open his notification when it arrives on their lock screens. Number 2. At least 2 of the elder statesmen who were not selected for track 9 are going to make public statements that read as gracious on the surface, but function as full endorsements of the choice underneath. Because the elder community understands what Kendrick Lamar has just done even more clearly than the fans understand it. The elder community protects its own, and the elder community closes ranks in silence more efficiently than any label rollout ever could. Number 3. The streaming numbers on the album's opening weekend are going to break the ceiling that Not Like Us set inside the first 24 hours of release, because track 9 is not a song people stream one time and move on from. Track 9 is a song people play for their parents on the drive home. Track 9 is a song people play at cookouts and at wedding receptions and at graduation parties. Track 9 is a song that crosses generations sideways rather than vertically. And songs that cross generations sideways are the songs that build catalog value that outlasts the artist himself by 30 years or more. The songs that end up licensed in documentaries in 2050 when the fans of today are watching them with their grandchildren. That last one is the part the algorithm cannot forecast in advance. And it is the part that is going to make this rollout the single most consequential rap release of the decade so far by a country mile, and by every measurable metric that actually matters at the catalog level. Now let me pull the lens back for a full moment here, because I want to place this credit line inside the larger arc of what Kendrick Lamar has been building since 2024. Kendrick Lamar has spent the last 2 years doing something that nobody else in the streaming era has managed to pull off inside a single career window. Kendrick Lamar has weaponized restraint. Kendrick Lamar has converted silence into a marketing budget. Kendrick Lamar has turned the absence of a public statement into an asset worth more than any statement his competitors could pay a top publicist to draft on a Sunday afternoon. Every time the internet demanded a response, Kendrick Lamar handed the internet a silence, and the silence was louder than any bar Kendrick Lamar could have written into a diss track. Every time a podcast tried to bait him into a comment, Kendrick Lamar handed them a photograph or a snippet or a stage entrance instead. Every time a journalist attempted to bracket him inside a narrative, Kendrick Lamar released a music video that reset the frame entirely. This track 9 credit is the crown moment of that 2-year strategy, because it is the ultimate statement made without a statement. A credit line. 2 words at the bottom of a metadata file, printed in a font most listeners will not consciously register. And an entire industry rearranges its calendar around those 2 words inside a 96-hour window. There is nobody else operating in this genre who can force that outcome tonight. There is nobody else who has earned the ability to force it through a decade of accumulated moral capital. And there is nobody else who has grasped the underlying truth that the credit line is stronger than the verse, because the verse is a performance and the credit line is an inheritance. Kendrick Lamar understood the difference before any of his peers even sensed the distinction existed at all. And this is the album where that understanding cashes out in full and in public. Consider what this signals for the rest of the boxing metaphor across the track list. If track 9 is the referee, then every track before track 9 is the fight itself, and every track after track 9 is the celebration lap around the arena. Which means the sequencing on this album is telling you the story of the last 2 years in real time from opening bell to closing horn. The opening tracks are the setup. The middle tracks are the exchange in the center of the ring. Track 9 is the raised hand. And whatever sits at the tail end of this track list is not a song. It is a victory lap set to music, released for public consumption after Kendrick Lamar has already spent 18 months privately rehearsing that lap inside his own head, inside the studio. Inside the boxing gyms he has been photographed leaving in the small hours of the morning. Which brings us back around to the exact question I opened this video with, and to the exact reason the industry is frozen at this precise hour on this precise night. The map is about to be redrawn. Not the map of who is currently popular on any given Tuesday. Not the map of who is currently charting inside the Billboard Top 10. The map of who counts. The map of who descends from who. The map that the culture will pull off the shelf and consult in 20 years when the question inevitably arrives at every barbershop and every dinner table: who inherited the throne of this genre? That map is being printed right now inside a Burbank Post facility 3 exits off the freeway. That map has an elder statesman's signature stamped at the top of track 9 in permanent ink. And that map does not include a certain artist from Toronto, no matter how many wires he sends across the border this week or next week or the week after that or the week after that. Let me also say this before I go, because it matters more than any other point I have made tonight. Kendrick Lamar is not doing this out of spite. This is the read that every commentator online is going to get wrong the exact moment the credits populate. They are going to frame track 9 as a shot, as a swipe, as a final humiliation aimed at a specific rival across the border. That reading is lazy, and it is beneath what Kendrick Lamar is actually constructing here. Track 9 is not aimed at a rival. Track 9 is aimed at history itself. Track 9 is aimed at the version of hip-hop that will exist in 2045 when the current chart cycle is dust and the current podcast circuit is retired and the only thing still standing on the shelf is the archive. Kendrick Lamar is writing to the archive. He always has been. He was writing to the archive on Section 80. He was writing to the archive on Good Kid, Mad City. He was writing to the archive on To Pimp a Butterfly and on Damn and on Mr. Morale and on G-Nex. His rivals happen to stand between him and the archive along the way, and the archive is the door he has been walking toward the entire time without ever slowing his stride to acknowledge them. If you made it this far into the video, you are one of the small percentage of people inside this culture who is going to see this one coming before it lands on the timeline for everyone else. So do me one favor before you close this tab. Save this video. Timestamp it in your notes app. Come back to it on release night when the credits go live. Because when the credits populate and you scroll down to track 9 and you read the name printed on that single line, I want you to remember exactly where you heard about it first. I want you to remember that the paperwork existed 21 days before the announcement. I want you to remember that the industry knew and stayed quiet because the industry was scared of ending up on the wrong side of a Kendrick Lamar family record for the next 30 years. And when you are done doing that, go watch the video I posted last week about the specific studio session PG Lang has been trying to keep out of the public record for the past 6 months, because that session is the exact one that produced the vocal chain we have been mapping tonight, and the 2 videos read as one continuous document once you watch them back to back. Everything I have handed you tonight connects. Nothing inside a PG Lang rollout is coincidence. Nothing on a Kendrick Lamar album is decoration. Nothing on this track list is filler. And nothing about track 9 is a feature. Track 9 is a verdict. Signed, sealed, and about to be broadcast to the entire planet at midnight in a rollout window measured in weeks, not months. Drop your guess in the comments below right now. Sharpest name gets pinned tomorrow morning at 7 Pacific. And I will see you inside the next video, where the paper trail keeps unrolling and the calendar keeps tightening around every artist on the other side of this argument. Because this rollout has one more layer none of us in the commentary space have talked about yet, and that layer is going to make the referee reveal look like the opening bell of a much longer fight card. That layer involves a second credit on a different track, from a different lineage entirely. That layer is going to reframe what the album is even saying about itself. And that layer is inside the paperwork I am going to walk you through in the next video, so keep the notification on tonight before you close your phone. Until then, keep the notification on. Keep your timestamps ready. Keep your group chats open. Keep your streaming service already logged in on the primary device. Because Kendrick Lamar is not finished. And neither is the paperwork. And neither is the industry silence. And neither is the calendar. Every one of those clocks is still ticking tonight, and every one of them is ticking on Kendrick Lamar's schedule, not yours, not mine, not the labels, not the internet's. One last thing before I go. If you have ever wondered why Kendrick Lamar refuses to speak in press cycles, why Kendrick Lamar refuses to explain his own work, why Kendrick Lamar refuses to caption his own posts on social media, this credit line right here is the entire answer. Kendrick Lamar has been operating on the assumption that the work will explain itself the moment the work is finished. And the work is now finished. The mixing is done. The mastering is scheduled inside the next 2 weeks. The pressing plant has already received the digital masters under the shell entity we have been tracking together tonight. The vinyl variants are already in production at a facility in Nashville that only handles projects with airtight non-disclosure agreements. The credit line is locked. And the archive is about to receive its newest permanent entry, signed at the top by the one elder statesman in this country whose signature cannot be bought, cannot be borrowed, cannot be leased, and cannot be forged by any accounting department on any label anywhere on the planet. And let me tell you why that matters more tonight than it has ever mattered before in the history of this genre. Because the culture is at an inflection point that most commentators are refusing to name out loud. The streaming era has produced an entire generation of rappers whose entire brand rests on manufactured lineage, manufactured legacy, manufactured cosigns paid for through label discretionary funds and quietly reimbursed inside the marketing line items that nobody ever audits. Kendrick Lamar is the only artist inside the top tier of this genre who has refused to participate in that system from the beginning of his career forward. Kendrick Lamar has never purchased a cosign. Kendrick Lamar has never paid a legend to appear next to him at an awards show. Kendrick Lamar has never traded a magazine cover for a verse. And that discipline over 15 years of active work is what earned him the first ask position with the Elder on track 9, while every other artist in the top 10 got the second ask position, which, as we established earlier tonight, does not exist inside that Elder's protocol. Think about how surgical that is. Think about how quietly ruthless that is. Kendrick Lamar did not outnegotiate anyone for this credit. Kendrick Lamar did not outbid anyone for this credit. Kendrick Lamar outlived them. Kendrick Lamar outworked them. Kendrick Lamar outdisciplined them across a 15-year window while they were busy purchasing shortcuts. And now the receipt for that discipline is about to be printed on track 9 of an album that is going to sit inside the American canon for the next 50 years alongside Illmatic, alongside Ready to Die, alongside The Blueprint, alongside My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, alongside every record that stopped time when it dropped and reset the clock on the entire genre in the same motion. That is the frame most people are going to miss on release night. That is the frame the podcasts are going to fumble in their instant reaction episodes. That is the frame the reaction channels are going to gloss over inside their 30-second thumbnails. But that is the frame you are walking away from this video with tonight, because you sat through the whole video and you now understand what nobody else in your feed will understand until at least Tuesday morning. Drop the name in the comments below right now while it is still fresh. See you at midnight on release night. And remember where you heard it first, because when the paperwork becomes public record and the credit populates on your streaming app, you are going to want the receipts on your side of the timeline. Not on the timeline of somebody who watched this video secondhand after you already told them what was coming.